What if I told you that the most dangerous woman in Westeros wasn't destroyed by her enemies, but by her own mind? That every move she made to gain power actually guaranteed her destruction? And that by chapter 11, I'll show you the exact psychological moment where her fate became inevitable, years before the wildfire. Stay with me, because understanding Cersei's psychology reveals something terrifying about narcissism, trauma, and why some people can't stop destroying themselves no matter how intelligent they are. But first, we need to understand what broke her. Cersei Lannister was born perfect, beautiful, intelligent, ambitious, born minutes before her twin brother Jaime. And that detail, those few minutes, destroyed her entire life. Here's what's psychologically fascinating, and this connects to something shocking I'll reveal in chapter 8. Cersei is actually brilliant. She has strategic intelligence, political instincts, and genuine capabilities. But nobody sees it. Why? Because she's a woman in a patriarchal system. And more specifically, because she's Tywin Lannister's daughter, not his son. Let me show you the psychological trap she was born into. From birth, Cersei knows she's identical to Jaime in every way that matters. Same intelligence, same Lannister blood, same birth moment essentially. But the world treats them completely differently. Jaime gets trained in combat, prepared for leadership, valued for his mind and body. He's the golden heir. Cersei gets trained in looking pretty and being marriageable. She's a political tool. In psychology, we call this cognitive dissonance. When your internal reality doesn't match external treatment. I'm just as capable as my brother, but I'm treated as inferior. This creates a specific psychological wound. And I'm going to show you exactly how this wound metastasizes into the monster we see later. But there's something else that happens in her childhood. Something that programs her entire psychology for decades. The witch Maggie the Frog gives her a prophecy. She marry the king. She be queen. She have 3 children. The king will have 20. A younger, more beautiful queen will cast her down. Her children will die before her. And the Valonqar, the little brother, will wrap his hands around her throat and choke the life from her. Now, here's the psychological question that's going to haunt this entire analysis. Does the prophecy create her fate, or does her belief in the prophecy create it? Stay with me, because by chapter 9, I'm going to show you how her entire self-destruction is actually a self-fulfilling prophecy driven by her own psychology, not magic. But first, you need to understand what that prophecy did to a young girl's mind. Let's talk about Cersei's relationship with her father, because this is the wound everything else flows from. Cersei is smart, ambitious, strategic. In many ways, she's the child most like Tywin psychologically, and she desperately wants his recognition, his approval, his acknowledgement that she's worthy. But Tywin can't see it, or won't see it. He looks at his brilliant daughter and sees ... a womb, a marriage alliance, a tool for connecting families. He dismisses her ideas, ignores her capabilities, tells her she's not as smart as she thinks she is. And here's what's psychologically devastating. He's wrong. She is smart. She is capable. But his dismissal creates something toxic. What psychologists call father hunger combined with compensatory narcissism. She becomes obsessed with proving she's as capable as any man. Specifically, as capable as her father and brothers. But because she can never get that validation from Tywin, her need for it becomes insatiable. No amount of power or recognition will ever fill that hole. This is the psychological engine that drives everything she does. Every grab for power. Every cruel decision. Every paranoid move. She's trying to prove to a dead man that she was worth seeing. And you can't win that game. The judge is gone. The validation will never come. Now let's talk about her marriage, because this is where everything accelerates. Cersei is supposed to marry Prince Rhaegar. She's supposed to be princess, then queen. She's been preparing her whole life for this. Then Robert's rebellion happens. Rhaegar dies. And Cersei ends up married to Robert anyway, but as a consolation prize, not a choice. And Robert, on their wedding night, is drunk and calls her Lyanna. Think about the psychology of that moment. Your wedding night. The man who's supposed to want you is thinking of a dead woman, calling you by her name. This confirms every fear Cersei has. That she's second best, that she's not really wanted, that even when she wins, she loses. And it gets worse. Robert is a terrible husband. He drinks constantly. He's unfaithful constantly. He's sometimes physically abusive. He clearly doesn't love her, doesn't want her, barely tolerates her. For most women, this would be traumatic but survivable. But for Cersei, with her specific psychology, it's gasoline on a fire. Why? Because it confirms her core wound. I'm a woman, so I'm not valued. I'm a tool, not a person. I'm trapped by my gender. We need to talk about Jaime, the incest. Because it's not just scandalous, it's psychologically revealing. Cersei's relationship with Jaime is her attempt to reclaim power in a powerless situation. Think about it psychologically. She can't choose her husband. She can't control Robert's infidelity. She can't access political power directly. But she can have a secret relationship with the one man who sees her as an equal, who treats her as Tywin should have, who was hers first. This is psychological rebellion combined with narcissistic supply. Jaime is the only person who validates her as she wants to be validated, as powerful, as worthy, as deserving. And here's what's crucial. The children being Jaime's, not Robert's, is her ultimate fuck you to the system. She's put bastards on the throne. She's fooled everyone. She has ultimate secret power. This is what psychologists call a narcissistic triumph. Secret superiority over everyone who thinks they have power over you. But here's the problem, and this is where we see her psychology becoming self-destructive. This secret is also her ultimate vulnerability. If it's discovered, everything collapses. Her children lose legitimacy. She loses everything. A psychologically healthy person would recognize this risk and be careful. But Cersei can't, because the narcissistic triumph is too important to her sense of self. She needs to be the one who fooled everyone, who held ultimate secret power, so she takes increasingly reckless risks. And when people start suspecting, instead of being more careful, she gets more aggressive. This is narcissistic psychology in action. The need for triumph overwhelms risk assessment. Let's talk about Cersei's children, because her parenting reveals everything about her psychology. Joffrey, her firstborn, her golden boy. She spoils him completely. No discipline. No boundaries. Whatever he wants, he gets. He's perfect in her eyes, even as he's clearly becoming a monster. Why? What's the psychology here? Joffrey is her narcissistic extension. He's her proof of worth. Look what I created. Look at this perfect Lannister king. She can't see his flaws because seeing them would mean seeing her own failure. And narcissists cannot tolerate evidence of failure. So instead, she explains away every cruelty, every sadistic impulse, every warning sign. He's just spirited. He's just asserting dominance. He's just being a strong king. This is called narcissistic parent blindness. Your children are extensions of yourself, so their failures are your failures. Better to deny the failures exist. And here's where it gets psychologically dark. Cersei's failure to parent Joffrey properly isn't just neglect. It's active enabling. She teaches him that he's above consequences, that he can do whatever he wants. That cruelty is strength. And when he becomes an uncontrollable tyrant who gets himself killed, she blames everyone else. Tyrion, the Tyros, fate, never her own parenting. This inability to accept responsibility is core narcissistic psychology. Nothing is ever your fault. Everything bad that happens is someone else's doing. But here's what's interesting. Her other two children, Tommen and Myrcella, are different. They're sweet, kind, well-adjusted despite everything. Why? What's different? Psychologically, Cersei wasn't as invested in them. Joffrey was the heir, the king, the important one. The other two were spares. So she didn't pour all her narcissistic needs into them, which, ironically, let them develop healthier. This reveals something crucial about narcissistic parenting. The child who gets the most love, narcissistic investment, is often the most damaged. The neglected children sometimes turn out better. Because narcissistic love isn't really love. It's using the child to meet your own needs. When Myrcella dies, Cersei grieves genuinely. When Tommen dies, she's destroyed. But notice what she doesn't do. She doesn't reflect on her role in their deaths. She doesn't question her choices. She just feels victimized, persecuted, targeted by cruel fate. This is the narcissistic wound. Things happen to you, never because of your choices. Now we need to examine Cersei's hatred of Tyrion, because this reveals her darkest psychology. From childhood, she blames him for their mother's death. She tries to hurt him as a baby. She hates him with a passion that goes beyond reason. Why? What's the psychology? On the surface, it's simple. He killed their mother. He's a dwarf, an embarrassment. He exists when Joanna doesn't. But psychologically, it's more complex. Tyrion represents everything Cersei fears. He's powerless, small, dwarfed, dismissed, but survives through intelligence. He's rejected by Tywin but still succeeds. He's everything she's afraid of becoming. If Tyrion can succeed despite being lesser, then maybe gender isn't the only thing holding Cersei back. Maybe it's her own psychology. She can't accept this. So she projects all her fears onto him. And here's where it becomes self-destructive. Her obsession with destroying Tyrion makes her increasingly paranoid, irrational, and easy to manipulate. The trial for Joffrey's murder? She doesn't care about evidence. She wants Tyrion dead regardless of guilt. This is emotion-driven thinking overwhelming strategic thinking. Her psychology is sabotaging her own interests. And when Tyrion escapes and kills Tywin, she doesn't reflect on what drove him to that point. She just adds it to her list of reasons to hate him. This inability to see her own role in creating her enemies is classic narcissistic blindness. Here's where we need to talk about the walk of shame, because this is the psychological breaking point where Cersei transforms completely. The faith militant arrests her, accuses her of adultery, incest, treason. They strip her, cut her hair, make her walk naked through King's Landing, while people throw filth and scream abuse. This is, psychologically, the ultimate narcissistic injury. For someone whose entire identity is built on beauty, power, superiority, being literally naked and humiliated in front of the masses is ego death. Everything she's built to protect her fragile self-worth is stripped away. And underneath? Just a person, vulnerable, human, weak. For a narcissist, this is worse than physical death. And here's what's crucial. This event changes her psychology permanently. Before the walk, Cersei still had some restraint, some political calculation, some ability to think strategically. After the walk, she's pure rage, pure revenge, pure destruction. She's not trying to rule anymore. She's trying to make everyone feel what she felt. Hurt, humiliated, destroyed. This is narcissistic rage at its most extreme. When the false self is destroyed, when the grandiosity is shattered, what's left is pure, destructive fury. And in Chapter 10, I'll show you how this transformation makes her final act inevitable. Here's something most people miss about Cersei. She's actually intelligent. Not at Tyrion or Tywin's level, but genuinely smart. She understands people. She can read political situations. She has strategic instincts. So why does she make such consistently terrible decisions? This is what I call the intelligence paradox of narcissism. Smart enough to be dangerous, not wise enough to see your own blind spots. Let me show you specific examples. Arming the faith militant. Strategically, she thinks, I'll use religious fanatics to destroy my enemies, then discard them when I'm done. What actually happens? They turn on her immediately. She becomes their target. Why didn't she see this coming? Because her narcissism told her she could control them, that she was smarter than everyone, that she was special, killing all her allies. The Tyrells, who were actually supporting her power. Various houses that could have been leveraged. Why? Because she can't tolerate anyone else having power. She sees all power as zero-sum. Someone else's strength is her weakness. This is narcissistic thinking. Unable to build genuine alliances because that requires seeing others as valuable. She only sees tools or threats, blowing up deceptive Baylor. This is the ultimate example. Yes, it eliminates her immediate enemies, but it also kills hundreds of innocents, destroys the central religious institution, makes her a clear tyrant, eliminates any moral legitimacy, directly causes Tommen's suicide. A strategic thinker would see these costs and find another way. But Cersei isn't thinking strategically anymore. She's thinking emotionally. They humiliated me. Now I destroy them. Consequences don't matter. This is intelligence without wisdom. Tactics without strategy. Narcissistic rage masquerading as power. Let's talk about Cersei's increasing paranoia. Because this is textbook narcissistic psychology. Narcissists live in a paranoid universe. Everyone is plotting against them. Every criticism is an attack. Every independent action is betrayal. Why? Because their grandiose self-image requires that they're the most important person. So naturally, everyone must be thinking about them, plotting about them, reacting to them. The reality that most people don't think about you that much is unbearable to the narcissistic mind. Watch Cersei's paranoia escalate. Early on, she's suspicious but somewhat rational. She has real enemies and real plots to worry about. By the middle, she's seeing betrayal everywhere. Tyrion is plotting. The Tyrells are plotting. Margaery is plotting. Everyone is plotting. Some of this is accurate, but she also sees plots where they don't exist. She misreads situations because she assumes everything is about her. By the end, she's completely paranoid. Even Jaime, her twin, her lover, her most loyal supporter, becomes suspect. This is the narcissistic spiral. As your psychology becomes more rigid, your ability to accurately assess reality decreases. You see more threats. You trust fewer people. You become more isolated, which confirms your paranoid worldview, which makes you more paranoid. It's a death spiral. And Cersei rides it all the way down. Cersei is addicted to power. And I mean that literally, not metaphorically. Power activates the same reward centers in the brain as drugs. Dopamine release, pleasure response. And like any addiction, you need more and more to get the same effect. For Cersei, power is the only thing that makes her feel valuable. The only thing that soothes the wound of being dismissed by her father and trapped by her gender. When she has power, she feels alive, worthy, real. When she doesn't, she feels like nothing. This is why she can't share power, can't delegate, can't trust advisors, can't build sustainable systems. Because sharing power means less for her. And less power means feeling worthless. Watch how she interacts with advisors. Tyrion, when he's hand, makes smart decisions. She undermines him at every turn. Not because his decisions are bad, but because he has power she doesn't. The small council tries to advise her. She dismisses them, mocks them, ignores their expertise. She'd rather make bad decisions that are hers than good decisions from others. This is addiction psychology. The addictive substance, power, becomes more important than anything else, including survival, relationships, basic welfare. And like all addictions, it requires escalating doses. She needs more and more extreme displays of power to feel the same satisfaction. This is why she ends up burning the sept, why she blows up hundreds of people, why she sits on the Iron Throne and feels nothing but the need for more. The addiction is never satisfied. The hole it's trying to fill is unfillable. Remember the prophecy from Maggie the Frog? Let me show you something that's going to blow your mind. The prophecy doesn't cause Cersei's fate. Her belief in the prophecy causes it. This is called a self-fulfilling prophecy in psychology. When your belief in a prediction causes you to behave in ways that make it come true. Let's break it down. A younger, more beautiful queen will cast you down. Who does Cersei immediately suspect? Margaery Tyrell, who's younger and more beautiful. So what does Cersei do? She treats Margaery as an enemy. She plots against her. She tries to destroy her. But Margaery wasn't initially trying to destroy Cersei. She was trying to be queen, yes, but there was room for alliance. Cersei's paranoid hostility turns Margaery into an actual enemy. The prophecy creates the threat it predicted. But here's what's even more interesting. Margaery isn't the younger, more beautiful queen who casts her down. Daenerys is. If Cersei hadn't spent all her energy on paranoid power games, if she built actual alliances, if she prepared for real external threats, she might have survived Daenerys. But she didn't, because she was too busy obsessing over the prophecy and destroying imagined threats. The prophecy made her paranoid. The paranoia made her make bad decisions. The bad decisions led to her downfall. Not magic, psychology. And then there's the Valonqar. The little brother will wrap his hands around your throat. Cersei assumes this means Tyrion, so she hates him even more. Tries to kill him multiple times. Creates him as an enemy. But psychologically, this obsession blinds her to the actual threat. Who actually might be the Valonqar? Jaime, her twin, technically born minutes after her, making him little brother, and she drives him away. Her paranoia, her cruelty, her inability to see him as anything but an extension of herself. She creates the very betrayal she feared. This is the core psychology of self-fulfilling prophecies. Your attempts to prevent the outcome are exactly what cause it. Greek tragedy understood this thousands of years ago. Oedipus fleeing his fate runs directly into it. Cersei, trying to prevent the prophecy, makes every single choice that ensures it comes true. Let's talk about what Cersei becomes by the end. The queen sitting on a throne in a destroyed city. She has power. She has the crown. She has what she always wanted. And it means nothing. Why? Because narcissistic supply from external sources never fills the internal void. She's queen, but her children are dead. Her father, who never validated her, is dead. Jaime has left her. She has no allies, only people who fear her. She's achieved the goal and discovered it was empty all along. This is the tragedy of narcissistic psychology. You spend your whole life chasing external validation, external markers of worth, external power. And when you get them, you discover they don't heal the original wound. The hole is still there. For a brief moment, sitting on that throne, I think Cersei feels the emptiness, the absolute meaninglessness of everything she's done. But she can't process this realization, can't sit with it, can't let it change her. So she doubles down, more power, more control, more destruction. If the power you have doesn't make you feel worthy, you must need more power. The addiction logic. The next hit will be the one that works. It never is. Here's a question that cuts to Cersei's core psychology. Does she have empathy? Can she feel others' pain? Or is she a complete psychopath? The answer is more complex than you'd think. And it reveals something crucial about narcissistic psychology. Cersei does feel empathy, but only for people she sees as extensions of herself. Her children? She feels their pain intensely because they're part of her. Their suffering is her suffering. Giant. She feels for him sometimes because he's her twin, her mirror, her other half. But anyone outside her narcissistic bubble? Nothing. The small folk mean nothing to her. She blows up the sept and feels no remorse for the hundreds dead. Her political enemies? She delights in their suffering. Even potential allies like the Tyrells. She can't feel empathy for them because seeing them as human with their own needs would require seeing them as separate from her needs. This is narcissistic empathy. Selective, limited to the self and extensions of self. And this is why she can commit atrocities without guilt. The people she hurts don't register as real humans in her psychology. They're objects, obstacles, tools. This isn't psychopathy, which is innate lack of empathy. This is narcissistic damage that's created a similar outcome. She had the capacity for empathy, but her wounds, her defenses, her ego structure have functionally eliminated it for anyone outside her narrow circle. Everyone says Cersei is like Tywin. She thinks she's like Tywin. She wants desperately to be Tywin. But here's the psychological reality. She has all his flaws without his strengths. Tywin's strengths: strategic patience, long-term planning, emotional control, political calculation, ability to delay gratification. Cersei's psychology: impulsive reactions, short-term thinking, emotional volatility, political recklessness, immediate need for gratification. She has Tywin's: ruthlessness, lack of empathy, outside narrow circle, pride, need for control, dismissal of others, but without the strategic discipline to make ruthlessness effective. This is what makes her so dangerous and self-destructive. She's smart enough to do damage, but not wise enough to avoid destroying herself in the process. Tywin built a brutal but stable power structure. It collapsed after his death, but it held while he lived. Cersei's power structure is collapsing while she's still alive, because it's built on emotion and ego, not strategy. She's what Tywin would be with his worst traits amplified and his best traits removed. All rage, no patience. All pride, no planning. This is the daughter desperately trying to be the father and failing because she's never looked at herself honestly enough to understand where she's different. The Sept of Baelor explosion is the moment Cersei crosses a line psychologically that she can never uncross. Let's analyze what happens in her mind when she makes this decision. She's facing trial, facing humiliation again, facing potential execution. All her enemies in one place. And she has wildfire, literal scorched earth option. A psychologically healthy person, even a ruthless one, would calculate collateral damage, political consequences, moral weight, long-term impact, alternative options. Cersei calculates none of these. Or she does and doesn't care. Why? Because at this point, her psychology has shifted from achieve power to destroy everyone who hurt me. This is narcissistic rage overwhelming everything else. The walk of shame broke something in her that never healed. She's not trying to rule wisely anymore. She's trying to make everyone hurt like she hurt. This is the psychology of the scorched earth narcissist. If I can't have love, respect, validation, then fuck everyone. Burn it all. And when she watches the Sept explode, when she watches her enemies die, what does she feel? Not remorse. Not horror at what she's done. Satisfaction. Finally, she has ultimate power. She's shown them. She's the one in control. But there's a cost she doesn't see coming. Tommen watches the smoke rising, realizes his wife is dead, his mother murdered hundreds, and he walks to the window and steps out. Her son, her child, the one person whose love she counted on, kills himself because of what she's done. And this is the moment that should break her, should cause reflection, remorse, psychological crisis. But it doesn't. She doesn't even cry at his funeral. She just crowns herself queen. This is complete narcissistic emotional shutdown. The pain of facing what she's done is too great. so she feels nothing, moves forward. More power will fix it. It won't. It never does. By the final season, Cersei is completely isolated. She's driven away or killed. Her father, indirectly. Tyrion, he killed Tywin, fled. Jaime, multiple times. Finally, permanently. All allies, Tyrell's dead. Others abandoned. Her children, all dead. Any advisors worth listening to. She's surrounded only by Qyburn, an expelled Maester who enables her worst impulses. Gregor Clegane, a literal zombie. Euron, a psychopath using her. This is the end stage of narcissistic psychology. Complete isolation. Why does this always happen? Because narcissists cannot maintain genuine relationships. Every relationship is transactional, based on what the other person provides to the narcissist's ego. When people stop providing narcissistic supply, they're discarded or driven away. When people challenge the narcissistic self-image, they become enemies. When people show independence, it's seen as betrayal. Over time, everyone leaves or is pushed away. What remains is only people who are using you or being used. Cersei ends up pregnant, maybe, and alone. Her power is an illusion. Her throne sits in a city that hates her. Her kingdom is fracturing, and she can't see it. Her psychology won't let her see it. She still thinks she's in control. Still thinks she's winning. Still thinks she's the powerful queen she always wanted to be. This is the final tragedy of narcissistic psychology. You can be utterly defeated and still believe you're victorious. Because admitting defeat means admitting your fundamental unworthiness. The ego cannot allow that, so it denies reality itself. Let's talk about what Cersei did to Jaime, because this shows her psychology at its most destructive. Jaime loved her. Genuinely, obsessively, self-destructively. He gave up his honor for her, became Kingslayer for her and for King's Landing, but partly for her. Stayed by her side through everything. And she took that love and weaponized it. Used it, manipulated it. Never reciprocated it as real love, only as narcissistic supply. You and me against the world sounds romantic. But in Cersei's psychology, it actually means you exist to validate me. Watch how she treats Jon. When he loses his hand and has an identity crisis, does she support him emotionally? No. She's disappointed he's not the perfect Golden Knight anymore. When he tries to advise her, does she listen? No. She dismisses him, mocks him, ignores him. When he questions her decisions, does she engage? No. She sees it as betrayal. When he finally leaves her after she betrays their promise to fight the dead, does she reflect? No. She's just angry. He's not obeying. She never saw Jaime as a full person. He was always a mirror, a validation machine, an extension of herself. And when he finally develops enough sense of self to leave, her response isn't, "I drove away the one person who truly loved me." It's, "How dare he betray me?" This inability to see her role in destroying her relationships is core narcissistic psychology. Everyone who leaves is a betrayer. Everyone who stays eventually becomes unsatisfying. There's no winning. The tragedy is that Jaime's love was real. If Cersei had been capable of reciprocating genuinely, of seeing him as separate, of building actual partnership, they might have been formidable together. Instead, her psychology guaranteed she'd drive him away eventually, and she did. Let's return to the prophecy one final time. Because by the end, every part has come true. You'll be queen. Your children will die. A younger, more beautiful queen will cast you down. Daenerys, the Valonqar, will choke the life from you. Symbolically, Jaime leaves her to die. Literally, the Red Keep crushes them both. But here's what's psychologically crucial. None of this was inevitable. Every single part of the prophecy came true because of Cersei's choices. Her paranoia about being cast down made her make enemies who cast her down. Her inability to protect her children, because she spoiled Joffrey, empowered Tommen inadequately, couldn't see dangers clearly, led to their deaths. Her treatment of Jaime drove him to leave her, which led to their deaths together. The prophecy was a mirror showing her own psychological patterns, not a magical predetermined fate. This is what makes it tragic rather than just sad. It didn't have to be this way. If Cersei had processed her childhood wounds instead of building a fortress of narcissism around them, if she developed genuine relationships instead of transactional ones, if she'd valued wisdom over power, if she'd been capable of self-reflection, she could have been a genuinely formidable queen. She had the raw intelligence and political instinct. But her psychology made that impossible. The wounds were too deep, the defenses too rigid, the narcissism too complete. We need to address this directly. How much of Cersei's psychology is caused by being a woman in a patriarchal system? The answer: it's complicated. Her core wound, being dismissed because of her gender despite being capable, is real and valid. Patriarchy damaged her genuinely. If she'd been born male, she likely would have been mentored by Tywin, developed her strategic abilities properly, and possibly become a capable leader. The system failed her. That's not in question. But here's where it gets psychologically complex. Her response to that system created additional damage that wasn't inevitable. Many women in Westeros face the same patriarchal limitations. Margaery, Olenna, Sansa, eventually, Daenerys. They develop different psychological strategies. Some healthier, some not, but different. Cersei's specific response, developing narcissistic defenses and treating everyone as tools or threats, that wasn't the only possible response to patriarchy. It was her response based on her specific psychology, her specific wounds, her specific family dynamics. So yes, patriarchy damaged her. But her narcissistic personality structure transformed that damage into something that hurt everyone around her, including other women. She doesn't fight patriarchy. She internalizes it and tries to win at it by being more ruthless than the men. She doesn't build solidarity with other women. She sees them as competition, especially for male attention and power. She doesn't try to change the system. She just wants to be at the top of it. This is the difference between trauma response and personality disorder. Trauma happens to you. How you respond psychologically is about your defenses, your choices, your patterns. Cersei deserved better from the patriarchal system. And she also became someone who inflicted terrible damage on others. Both can be true simultaneously. Let's return to the central theme. Cersei is intelligent but not wise. Intelligence is the ability to think, learn, strategize, manipulate variables. Wisdom is the ability to see long-term, understand human nature deeply, make choices that account for complexity, learn from mistakes. Cersei has intelligence. She understands surface-level political dynamics. She can make tactical moves. She can read certain social situations. But she has zero wisdom. She doesn't understand human motivation beyond surface level. She thinks everyone is motivated by power and fear because that's what motivates her, aids her. She doesn't learn from mistakes. Every failure is someone else's fault, so there's no lesson to integrate. She doesn't see long-term consequences. She thinks 3 moves ahead tactically, but can't see the systemic effects of her choices. She doesn't understand that relationships are the foundation of stable power. She thinks control and fear are enough. Let me show you specific examples of intelligence without wisdom. Example 1. Arming the faith, militant intelligent move. Use religious fanatics to destroy the Tyrells and consolidate power. Lack of wisdom. Doesn't foresee that fanatics can't be controlled, that they'll turn on her. That giving zealots power never ends well for the person who empowered them. Result: the walk of shame, her own humiliation and psychological destruction. Example 2. Killing the Tyrells' intelligent move. Eliminate rivals for power in one devastating stroke. Lack of wisdom. doesn't see that the Tyrells were actually valuable allies, that she's isolated herself, that destroying your own supporters makes you weaker, not stronger. Result: no allies when Daenerys arrives. Complete isolation. Example 3. Refusing to help against the White Walker's intelligent move. Let her enemies fight the existential threat. Preserve her forces. Clean up whoever wins. Lack of wisdom. Doesn't understand that if the dead win, there's no throne to fight for. That this level of betrayal ensures no one will ever ally with her again. That some threats require cooperation. Result: complete moral bankruptcy revealed. Jaime leaves her. Her last genuine relationship destroyed. This pattern reveals the core difference. Intelligence can win battles. Wisdom wins wars and builds lasting peace. Cersei wins tactical engagements repeatedly and loses everything strategic. Let's talk about something revealing about narcissistic psychology. Cersei keeps score. She remembers every slight, every betrayal, every humiliation, and she wants everyone to pay. This is what psychologists call scorekeeping or grudge-keeping psychology. It's exhausting and ultimately self-destructive. Count the people Cersei destroys or drives away. Her husband Robert, she orchestrates his death. Her uncle Kevin, killed in Sept explosion. Marguerite Tyrell, Sept explosion. Loras Tyrell, Sept explosion. The High Sparrow, Sept explosion. Hundreds of innocents, Sept explosion. Essentially the entire faith, Sept explosion. Her son Tommen, indirectly, through the Sept. Ilaria Sand and her daughter, sadistic revenge. All of House Tyrell, poison. Any advisor who questions her, dismissed or killed. This isn't strategic elimination of threats. This is compulsive destruction. Each death is supposed to make her feel powerful. Supposed to heal the wound of humiliation. Supposed to prove she's not weak. But it doesn't. Each one just requires another. The narcissistic wound is never healed by external validation or revenge. It's like an addiction. The next hit will be the one that works. The next person destroyed will be the one that makes you feel whole. It never is. And psychologically, each death actually makes the wound deeper. Because each time you destroy someone, you reinforce the belief that you're alone against a hostile world. That everyone is a threat. That you can't trust anyone. Your own destructive behavior creates the hostile environment that justified the behavior in the first place. It's a psychological trap. And Cersei is completely caught in it. In the final season, Cersei is pregnant, or claims to be. We never know for certain. Let's analyze the psychology of this pregnancy, regardless of whether it's real. For Cersei, this pregnancy represents validation of her body's purpose in a system that valued women only as childbearers. Continuation of her bloodline after losing all 3 children. Control over Jaime by giving him a reason to stay. Weapon against Tyrion, who would hesitate to harm a pregnant woman. Ultimate narcissistic supply. Another child who would be completely hers. But notice what's missing. Any consideration of what that child would need. Any reflection on what went wrong with the first 3. Any preparation to parent differently. In Cersei's mind, this child exists to meet her needs. To replace what she lost. To prove she's still fertile, still valuable by patriarchal standards. The child is a person with needs and humanity of their own. Doesn't enter her psychology. This is narcissistic reproduction. Children as objects that provide supply. Not humans you're responsible for nurturing. And here's what's darkest. If that pregnancy is real, that child dies with her in the Red Keep collapse. Another child she couldn't protect because she couldn't see beyond her own needs. If it's fake, a manipulation, that's equally revealing. Using a non-existent child as a tool. Using the idea of motherhood while being incapable of actual maternal love. Either way, it shows the bankruptcy of her psychology by the end. Let's do a complete psychological autopsy of Cersei's downfall. Core wounds. Gender-based dismissal despite capability. Father's refusal to see her worth. Trapped in loveless marriage. Lost all 3 children. Public humiliation. Walk of shame. Defense mechanisms. Narcissistic grandiosity. I'm superior to everyone. Projection. Attributing her faults to others. Splitting. Black and white thinking. All good or all bad. Denial. Refusing to see her role in outcomes. Externalization. Everything is someone else's fault. Behavioral patterns. Impulsive decision-making based on emotion. Inability to maintain genuine relationships, scorekeeping, and revenge obsession. Paranoid interpretation of others' motives. Self-sabotage disguised as power moves, treating people as objects or threats, fatal flaws. Zero self-awareness, inability to learn from mistakes, confusing control with strength. Seeing all relationships as transactional, short-term thinking, overwhelming long-term planning. Narcissistic rage, overwhelming strategic calculation, diagnosis, if she were a patient. Narcissistic Personality Disorder, clear. Paranoid features, significant. Antisocial traits, lack of remorse. Manipulation, possible borderline features, emotional volatility, fear of abandonment. Complex trauma from childhood and marriage, unprocessed grief, multiple losses. Outcome, dies alone with Jaime in collapsing castle. Everything she built destroyed. No legacy except ashes. All 3 children dead before her, exactly as prophesied. Could it have been different? Yes. If she had developed self-awareness, if she had processed her wounds in therapy, if she had valued relationships over power, if she had learned from her mistakes. But that would have required a fundamental psychological shift she was incapable of making. Her defenses were too rigid, her wounds too deep, her narcissism too complete. The tragedy is that intelligence, beauty, and capability were all there. But without wisdom, self-awareness, and genuine connection, they all led to destruction. Why does Cersei's psychology matter beyond fiction? Because this pattern exists everywhere, and understanding it helps us identify and respond to it. The Cersei pattern in real life. The parent who sees their children as extensions, not individuals. Uses kids to meet their ego needs. Can't tolerate independence. Takes credit for successes. Blames kids for failures. Creates damaged children who struggle with identity. The leader who rules through fear and control. Intelligent but not wise, can't build genuine loyalty. Sees all power as zero-sum. Creates unstable organizations that collapse. The person who accumulates power but destroys relationships. Achieves external markers of success. Ends up isolated despite achievement. Can't understand why success feels empty. Keeps chasing more power to fill the void. The individual with unprocessed trauma who hurts others. Real wounds create defensive psychology. Defense mechanisms harm people around them. Refuses to acknowledge their own role, cycle of damage continues. Warning signs of Cersei psychology. Everything is always someone else's fault. Unable to maintain long-term relationships. Paranoid interpretation of neutral events. Scorekeeping and grudge holding. Inability to apologize or acknowledge mistakes. Treating people as tools or threats. Never equals. Short-term gratification over long-term well-being. External validation never feels like enough. Escalating destructive behavior despite consequences. If you recognize this pattern in someone in your life, the key insight is you cannot fix them. They have to want to change, and narcissistic psychology actively resists change. Your only options are boundaries, distance, or accepting them as they are. Let's end with the truth Cersei never understood. Power without wisdom is self-destruction. You can have all the intelligence, all the tactical skill, all the ruthlessness, but without wisdom to guide it, you'll destroy yourself. Control is not strength. Real strength includes vulnerability, trust, genuine connection. Control is often fear masquerading as power. People are not tools. The moment you start seeing people as objects to use or obstacles to remove, you've guaranteed your own isolation and eventual downfall. Revenge doesn't heal wounds. Every act of revenge is supposed to make you feel better. It never does. The wound remains. You just create new wounds in others and yourself. External validation cannot fill internal voids. No amount of power, beauty, achievement, or recognition can heal childhood wounds. That requires internal psychological work. Your children are not your second chances. They're not here to fulfill your dreams or heal your wounds. They're separate people who need genuine love, not narcissistic investment. Isolation is not strength. Needing no one doesn't make you strong. It makes you brittle. Genuine relationships are foundation of resilient power. The opposite mistake is still a mistake. Cersei spent her life trying not to be powerless like women in patriarchy. She became cruel like the men she resented. Different mistake, same suffering. Self-awareness is prerequisite for growth. You cannot change what you cannot see. Cersei's complete lack of self-awareness made growth impossible. Legacy is what you build, not what you destroy. You can tear down everything and everyone, but that's not legacy. Legacy is what you create that outlasts you. Cersei learned none of these. Her psychology made learning impossible. And so the brilliant, beautiful, capable woman destroyed everything, including herself. Here's what the title, "The Ego Behind Power," really means. Cersei's power was always an extension of her ego. She didn't seek power to achieve something meaningful. She sought it to prove her worth, to heal her wound, to show everyone who dismissed her that she mattered. Power was never the means to an end. It was the end itself. Because the real goal was ego validation. See? I'm queen. I'm powerful. I matter. You were all wrong about me, but here's the psychological truth. Power gained for ego validation never satisfies, because the wound underneath remains unhealed. You can be queen of the 7 kingdoms and still feel like the little girl whose father wouldn't see her. You can destroy all your enemies and still feel like the young wife whose husband called her by another woman's name. You can blow up the sept and kill hundreds and still feel the humiliation of the walk of shame. External circumstances cannot heal internal wounds. That requires psychological work, therapy, self-reflection, processing trauma, building genuine self-worth independent of external validation. Cersei never did this work. She couldn't. Her defenses wouldn't allow it. So she chased power endlessly, hoping the next level would finally make her feel worthy. It never did. That's the ego behind power. The desperate, wounded ego trying to use power as medicine for a wound that power cannot heal. And in the end, sitting in a crumbling castle, pregnant or not, with everyone she loved dead or gone, with her city burning, she finally faces the truth her psychology spent a lifetime denying. The power was always empty. The throne was always an illusion. The wound was always there, underneath everything. And then the Red Keep collapses, and her story ends exactly as the prophecy predicted, exactly as her choices guaranteed. Not because of magic, because of psychology. The ego behind power led her inevitably to this moment. Every choice, every cruelty, every paranoid move, every destroyed relationship, every failure to self-reflect, it all led here. To the rubble, to the end, to the final proof that you cannot build anything lasting on the foundation of a wounded ego and unprocessed trauma. That's Cersei Lannister, the woman who had everything except self-awareness. The queen who had all the power except the power to see herself clearly. The tragedy of intelligence without wisdom, capability without growth, strength without vulnerability. The ego behind power, and the rubble it always creates. So here's my question for you. Do you see any Cersei in yourself? The desire for external validation that never quite satisfies? the tendency to blame others when things go wrong, the difficulty maintaining genuine relationships while succeeding professionally, the scorekeeping and grudge holding, the belief that more power, success, achievement will finally make you feel worthy. These patterns exist on a spectrum. Most people aren't full Cersei-level narcissism, but these tendencies exist in all of us to varying degrees. The difference between tragedy and growth is self-awareness. Can you see these patterns in yourself? Can you acknowledge when you're letting ego drive decisions rather than wisdom? Can you process wounds rather than acting them out? That's the question. Cersei couldn't. Her psychology made it impossible. But you can. If you choose to look, if you choose to do the work, if you choose wisdom over ego, that's the lesson. Not just about her, but about all of us. The ego behind power is always there, whispering that external achievement will heal internal wounds. It won't. Only honest self-reflection, genuine connection, processed trauma, and built self-worth can do that. Choose differently than Cersei did. Choose self-awareness over defense mechanisms. Choose growth over ego protection. Choose wisdom over power. That's how you avoid the rubble. That's how you build something real. That's the difference between Cersei's tragedy and your potential triumph. The choice is yours.